right. We are just hitting our low 40s now. So while we're waiting for other people to join us, I'm going to jump in with a welcome to all of you. We are so happy to welcome you to the Women's Leadership Network meeting this month. And we're really grateful for the time that you made to stop for a moment to reconnect with other female leaders. We really hope that you look at this time as one where you can readjust your own proverbial oxygen masks so that you can continue to lead and serve in your communities. As I thought about Karen's topic today, dealing with difficult people, I was reminded of a favorite female colleague of mine. We were interviewing her for an assistant principal position in our district. As you all know, interviews are challenging times. You're seated at a table of people that you don't know, and you're not exactly sure what's going to be coming at you. And we asked one of my favorite kinds of questions, which is a scenario question. So there's lots of factors to consider in response to a challenging situation. And as this leader began to frame her response, she started with saying, I would like to take a moment to thank all the people in my life who have given me the opportunity to practice and grow my skills in dealing with difficult people. And it was such a wonderful opportunity for us all to chuckle a little bit as we thought about the people who had given us opportunities to practice and grow our skills in that capacity. So I know that you are looking forward to Karen's presentation today with me. And without further ado, Karen, we're closing in on 50 people. I'll turn it over to you to take it away. Karen is going to be talking with us about dealing with difficult people.
Well, good morning, everyone. And Lori is correct. It is about deepening our skills. We all have skills, or we wouldn't be in these jobs if we didn't have skills. We have got some great skills of dealing with difficult people, but it's about getting better at it and spending some time to think about how we do it and how we might get through the most difficult times, because I know there are many people right now dealing with some very, very difficult stuff. I met with some superintendents on Monday morning, and it was not a very pleasant meeting. There are people really struggling in that meeting. So I know there's a lot going on out there. I know just in all of your roles that you bump up against tough people, but I know superintendents right now are dealing with some very difficult times politically and with people that they are working with. So we're going to start out this morning with some reflection, and we're going to start out with 3 questions. We're going to break into small groups in the beginning here and spend about 20 minutes discussing 3 questions. And don't worry too much about the questions. We may have some time at the end where we can come back to these questions. So here they are. Are you ready, Lori, to show them the questions?
I am. First, I put the questions in the chat. Do you want them to be seen on the screen?
No, that's fine. I'll just go over them for everyone then. So how do you react to difficult people? What is your first reaction? And what is your most immediate instinct that you may or may not act on? And discuss one of the most difficult people you have encountered. So we'll break you into small groups and spend some time reflection, and we'll come back and spend a little bit of time on some skills. Okay, welcome back. So would any group like to report out? We have a lot of groups, but would anyone have anything that you'd like to say for the greater good?
Our group just really talked about I really like the phrase, listen to understand, not to respond. It's just listen to the words and not the tone and not the feeling, and get to the deeper understanding. And just how some of the women in my group, letters of expectation and documentation, just has really helped with different processes in dealing, with those difficult people, and just learning how to be direct and being okay with that. And it was just some really good dialogue in our group this morning.
Good. Thank you, Katie. Anyone else?
I'd love to share from our group. I learned something, and I think we all learned something. One of our participants shared Tampa. Thank them, acknowledge what they have said, mirror them, paraphrase them, and then end with an action step. And the individual who shared it has it taped on her phone so that when she's on the phone with whomever, that it's a good reminder for her. So thank you.
That's good. I want that person to do the presentation now.
Can you put that in the chat?
That'd be great. Thank you for sharing that. Anyone else? Interesting subject, and I think if we were all able to share in presentation, we'd probably come out with a better one than me just doing it, but I will share what I've got here for you. I want to start out with just saying that I mentioned the group I was in Monday morning. We talked a little bit about hope in that group. So I wanted to start out with some thoughts about hope, because hope does have a part in playing with us when we're dealing with difficult situations. But hope increases the sense of meaning in life and realization of goals and dreams, even in the midst of adversity. Individuals with high hope set loftier goals and are more likely to realize their goals. They also deal with difficult situations with more ease and difficult people with more certainty. Hope is a better predictor of success than intelligence or innate ability alone. So part of dealing with difficult people and difficult situations is about hope. And I want to tell you two things overall before I start the presentation that I think are the most important things as we enter into situations with very difficult people. One is compassion. If you can find compassion in your heart for that person, no matter how difficult they are, it truly does help the situation. And sometimes it is gruelingly difficult to find any compassion for that person. But even if it's at the level of, oh my goodness, what a difficult life this is, to be this angry all the time, in that you can find some compassion. And the second piece that I think is critically important as we move forward in dealing with tough people and tough times is observation. If you can remove yourself a bit mentally from the situation and become an observer and think about yourself with the very best observation skills you can have and begin to observe the situation, it's amazingly helpful for how much you then have separated yourself from being in that dialogue or the difficult situation, because now you're observing. And even if you're just observing at the level of, oh my goodness, this is fascinating, because who could ever think like this, or who could ever talk like this, or who could ever be like this, then I think that it's helpful to be in an observation role, even though you're still taking part in the situation, you still are removing yourself and thinking of it from an observational level. We can move on to the next slide. And do we have a system slide over this?
I am struggling to get it to move. I think I'm going to stop the sharing and try it again, Karen, because it's not working here.
Okay.
There we go. Sorry about that.
So I'm going to go through this without the slides then, if you all will bear with me and know that it will be a bumpier ride, but I'll just start moving through some of the discussion of it. But difficult behavior occurs on a continuum, as we all know. It is from passive to overt behavior. And passive is involved in inactive, and overt is hostile and aggressive behaviors. And so there are behaviors that fall within that continuum that may be not completely passive, not completely aggressive, but you're still dealing with difficult behavior. And next slide. Okay, so in the middle, we may just be the most difficult, and that's a passive aggressive person, which is really a person who really in passive aggression lies dishonesty and manipulation. And often they're the most difficult because you're not getting anything. You're not getting anything back. So that is awareness to know that sometimes you're dealing with the most difficult at that point. However, next slide, the people that are openly hostile and aggressive and have aggressive behavior and that are in our face are also just extremely difficult. They are harsh and forceful. They shout, they swear, they're abusive, they're domineering and controlling, and they come from a self-centered lens. So people that are extremely hostile, extremely aggressive in their behavior are really coming from a very self-centered spot. And the more self-centered they are, the more difficult it is to deal with them and the more difficult the situation is. And next slide. So why do people use hostile aggression? It is because they want to make sure things happen the way they want them to happen. And sometimes that they feel that they've lost something and they're trying to claw back control. So some of the people, when you think about some of the people that have been yelling and screaming in board meetings and going after superintendents, some of that started out from masking. And some of them feel that they lost something when their children had to mask and they're trying to claw back control. But it's not just that simple. It becomes much more complicated because these are people that are wanting to get their own way and get it the way they want it. The next slide. So as we communicate with people who are either hostile or aggressive or anywhere on this continuum, you want to spend a lot of time in listening. And we all know the active listening, the reflective listening. There's also minimal encouragers that we can use that are a positive body language, a positive look about you, and some positive vocalization are minimal encouragers. Repeating and paraphrasing and asking questions of the person if you're in a one-on-one, and showing some empathy toward that person, even in the most difficult times. Try to find something that would show them some empathy. And I liked what someone said before about thanking that person. Next slide. Learn from a good listener. If you want to hone your skills and you want to get better, I suggest finding someone who is very good at this, who may be very good in a very difficult situation, and observe them, take notes on them, and learn from them. Next slide. So as we stand up to difficult people, someone talked about becoming more direct in what we're doing. And that's true. So first of all, identify and explain the problem. Acknowledge your part, because somewhere in it you have a part. Acknowledge the reply and identify solutions, possibilities, and keep calm throughout the situation. And next slide. Dealing with direct hostility. And next slide. Our body language is important in dealing with direct hostility. I watched a board meeting this fall sometime, and I don't think anyone was aware of it, but the body language of some of the board members certainly did not help the situation when they were being yelled at. So we want to have assertive body language. We want to stand or sit up straight. There's nothing that you do here that becomes stilted, or I'm going to suddenly set my body in a certain way, but just to be somewhat aware that you want to keep your head level, relax your shoulders, spread your weight evenly if you're standing. If you're sitting, your arms should be on a chair, not to your side. You should have eye contact. You should lower the pitch of your voice. It's easy to become high strung and high vocalizations during a difficult situation. And there's nothing worse than that in terms of accelerating a problem. And speak more slowly. Next slide. Engage in reflective listening. Start with I. Don't use you. I, and negotiate and offer compromises and identify compromises. And next slide. When you're dealing with passive aggressive people, there are some things not to do. Do not get drawn in. You need to avoid sarcasm, excuses, and lies. You need to avoid saying you. You need to try to avoid trying to prove who is wrong, and try to not get angry or defensive. The next slide. So there are some people who fall into the impossible category. And I'm sure many of you are smiling at this and thinking about those that you are dealing with currently who fall into an impossible category. They are self-centered. They're often bullies. And it's really helpful to be thinking of the way they are bullying you, because they are bullying you. And it is helpful to place them in that category mentally, because it helps you understand that how you are being treated, and that you are not the cause of this, and you are not the problem in this, but you are literally being bullied at that time. And impossible people are called impossible for a reason. When you can, let them go and move on. If you've ever been in a group where someone starts bullying in the group, very often the group tends to go toward the bully. And sometimes when you're the person that's being bullied in the group, you get left behind, because the group goes to the bully because they don't want to get bullied next. And it really is a subconscious syndrome that you can see happening in a group when someone goes to bullying. So try to let them go and move on when you can. There are times when you can move away from a person or discard the person, but if you can ignore, it is really, really helpful to deal with an impossible person. When you can't ignore, you have to stay and put up with it. But when you can ignore and not give that person the fire behind their words or the fire behind their actions, it's really helpful. Working with a group of people right now that want a fight. They want a big fight. So we're trying to find a balance between setting information straight, but also setting things straight from the standpoint of just to move forward quickly. And the next slide is the Resiliency Advantage. This is from a book by Al Siebert, who talks about dealing with difficult people as he talks about resilient people, because people who are truly resilient are people that can deal with more difficult people, and they are better at it. So as you think about that, he talks about, next slide, that one of the highest level of resiliency is being able to deal with difficult people. And you probably are thinking about the skills that you do have to be able to deal with difficult people, and those are strong skills. And you probably are above and beyond most people who can't deal with difficult people at all. But when you think about that, he asks you to think about difficult people are people who act in ways and talk in ways that you find difficult. Next slide. So here's the hard part of his concepts, because he talks about accepting and believing. And he talks about every person gets to think and act the way they do. It's their prerogative. It is you who has the problem of not being able to handle them. That's a difficult one to swallow. It's you who has the problem of not being able to handle them. I think that's true to the degree of most difficult people. I think when you get to the people that are aggressive and hostile, that's not you not being able to handle them. But also difficult people can be converted into teachers. And that's where if we flip back to observation being one of the overlying skills and the overlying concepts of all work with difficult situations. Difficult people can be converted into teachers, and you can be learning from the situation, and you will be learning from the situation, whether it feels like it or whether the difficult situation feels so horrific that it's really, really very hard to take. You still are going to be learning from that situation if you can pull yourself out of the tough situation that you're in and realize that on the other end of this, you are going to have learned skills. And he also talks about, next slide, empathy and compassion. He uses empathy and compassion as a combined skill, and he calls it the skill of compathy. And he talks about it taking emotional strength and emotional intelligence to listen with compassion. And that is when we truly can get to the most highest level of skill building in dealing with difficult situations, when you can find compassion in the situation somehow, some way, and that takes emotional strength and that takes emotional intelligence. He has some steps for compathy steps, and those are next slide. He asks you in an opening to ask people to tell you what is upsetting them. And sometimes that is disarming to people. Sometimes it's an acknowledgement that they are upset. And it's amazingly, it works amazingly well with a lot of people. Ask them to tell you what is upsetting them. Listen closely, clarify, repeat, validate. Thank them. There's the thank you again. Add a point. Ask what do they want, and discuss possible solutions. So that concludes my presentation. These are references that I have used, but are also just really good reading. How to Deal with Difficult People, Smart Tactics for Overcoming the Problem People in Your Life. And I quoted a couple of times the Resiliency Advantage, Mastering Change, Thriving Under Pressure, and Bouncing Back from Setbacks. And that's an Al Siebert work. Okay. Now I'm trying to figure out here if we have time to go back into groups. And I don't think we do. So maybe a moment for any reactions or thoughts or additions, because I know many of you have skills that you could share with us. I'll open it up.
Karen, I really appreciated in the accepting and believing a part where you talked about difficult people can be converted to teachers. In our small group, I shared sometimes when we can educate a person, you know, in a polite way, in a proper way, that they then take that and share it with others, because then they understand where you're coming from. And they may not, I mean, we all get to deal with school board members who come from all different walks of life and professions who may not have the learning and experience that we have in education. So as we can help teach them and help them learn and share with others, that may calm other people down. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And it reminds me that many of us are in roles where we have to help the people around us, help our colleagues to walk into a difficult situation. And there again comes the teaching role, where we are teaching others how to behave, how to walk into that situation, how to feel better about that situation and not be so fearful that we are absolutely frozen in our responses or in our interaction at that point. So thank you. Other comments?
I just wanted to mention, Karen, you said, that we, it's one of the roles that we play is to help our directors or other leaders in the district, our principals, deal with difficult people as well. And it's a skill that I don't remember in any of my training having, maybe we talked about it, but I guess I don't remember it.
Right.
It's when I just had to read and practice and watch others. And so I've done a couple of just as the book studies, which sounds so archaic, but at the same time, it's a tool, and I'm interested in trying the two books, the two resources you mentioned. The book Mine is Ancient. It was by John Eller, Dealing with Difficult People, and it talked about paras, custodians. Most of you have probably have it, but we use that I used it with cabinet, and then I used it with our district office leaders too, because they don't have, some of them have different varying skills, but it was just nice. It was a conversation starter, and it was specific to their roles, like our director of buildings and grounds. There was a whole chapter on how to deal with difficult custodians, and not to say that our people are difficult, but at times we all can be difficult. So I think it was just nice to acknowledge that I don't have all the answers to, but then to have a conversation about it and lead like a discussion such as this. So it made me think of that when you just made that comment, Karen. So that's what I did, and it really was helpful for me too.
Anne-Marie, could you put that text in the chat so that others might?
Sure. Yep, I will
reference it?
find that book. Yes.
Great,
Let me
thank
tap
you.
it. Hold on.
Thank you, Anne Marie. And it again reiterates how important it is to talk about this in our work and to talk about how you're fearful to walk into that board meeting or to that next situation as well, and that you're, again, working on your skills all the time.
I think one of the things that I've found really helpful, a few years ago, we were part of a presentation and they were talking about increasing that empathy by not only putting yourself in the other person's shoes, but putting on under what circumstances would I act in this way? And it just created this whole, holy cow, would I have to be a mess to be coming in and yelling at people without asking questions first? And that just created a lot of well, why would I act that way?
Right.
Something
Really
that we talked about in our small group was just language that we sometimes use or fall back on. I think we probably all have some go-tos that we use, right? Like one of mine is something along the lines of, I'm so sorry, that's not the experience we want for families, students, staff members, whoever it is, right? But I wonder if folks, because Alicia, Dr. Mobley had another good one around, I think some of the things we can agree on might be, I wonder if others have kind of those go-to phrases. If they could throw them in the chat, I'd be curious to tap into kind of the collective expertise of the group.
Thank you. We invite people in. Any other thoughts on?
Taylor has a question or something to share.
On this kind of along with what was just said, but in our breakout group, Shelley shared a really simple, seemingly effective strategy of just slowing down when someone comes in, like really agitated, asking them to take a seat, slowly walking over to close the door. And then if they're kind of going on and on saying, can we, back up and start from the beginning? I really want to understand, what your concern is. And so just making it a point to slow down. And I thought that was a great strategy.
Mm-hmm.
It's a really good strategy. We often go to talking. We often go to sharing with that person when we really need them to explain to us what's going on for them. Other thoughts? Melissa mentioned apology, and I just can't say enough about, I know our attorneys don't love apologies, but they go a long way. When you're able to apologize in a situation, or you take the compassionate moment to make an apology for what has happened, even if you know it's just their perception that that's happened and it hasn't happened, it's critically important, and it often can diffuse a situation in a very large way. Any other thoughts? Well, I thank you all. It's been a great session. I'm sorry that we had some technology problems and it made it a a little bit bumpier to move through it, but I thank you. And I want to close this out with a quote from Jeanette Carone. And from there, I will say goodbye to all of you and wish you a very, very wonderful remainder of the fall. But Jeanette Carone says to us, sometimes the bad things we experience in life can teach us the greatest and most valuable lessons. The bad things we experience and the bad people we meet are teachers. They teach us how to be stronger. They teach us how to learn to forgive. And forgiveness is a very big part of this process. They teach us how to have patience, and they teach us how to keep a good attitude when things are difficult. Thank you all and wish you a peaceful election week.